set, train, ready now!
Stay. Watch it.
You're watching Rugby Wrap Up!
Brought to you by our friends of the British Council. Hey everybody, welcome back to Rugby Wrap Up. Matt McCarthy at the Fantasy Sports Network, Studio 34 on West 35th Street in New York City, the spectacular Renaissance Hotel. And we have a spectacular guest to live up to that billing, Mr. Peter Jackson, calling in. Peter Jackson, who knew that such a big-time Hollywood director, Lord of the Rings, District 9, King Kong, a Kiwi, would be covering rugby in the Northern Hemisphere, in the UK, and living in Cardiff?
I think he's got something more profitable to do, Matt. But every time I go to New Zealand, they look at my passport and they say, famous name around here. And I said, yeah, he's got all the Oscars. But also, as you will appreciate, it's a famous name in rugby. I mean, the Peter Jackson was one of my boyhood heroes. He was a wonderful, they called him Nijinsky because of the way he ran. Nobody could get near him. Played for England, he played for the Lions in the late 50s, early 60s. Absolute magical player. I never could be anywhere near that, so I settled just rocking.
All right, well, you know what? You are a star anyway, and you were doing stuff long before the Peter Jackson in New Zealand was doing it. So just so folks know, you are a veteran journalist / pundit, covering rugby for over 50 years, despite the fact that you're only 38. The vast majority of your time was spent with the Daily Mail. I believe you retired allegedly in 2009, but your retirement you took up working with the rugby paper, and now you have recently embraced television as a straight-talking, crowd-pleasing pundit on BBC Wales Scrum 5. Am I right so far?
Yeah, that's very kind of you, Matt, to say. Don't know much about crowd-pleasing. I probably annoy as many people as I please, but no, I mean, there's been a lot to be critical about in Welsh rugby of late, and
we're going to get to that right now, sir. Specifically about what's gone on in the November Internationals so far. Why don't we pick it up with the last few minutes of the Wales versus Georgia? Can you explain what the Sam Hill happened in layman's terms as quickly as you can for the folks at home that were completely flummoxed?
That's the most demanding question I've been asked for many a year. What happened was that in the final play of the game, the Georgian scrum had Wales in all sorts of trouble. As a result of that, Wales lost their tight head prop, Thomas Francis, to the bin. So everybody waited for his replacement to come on the field. Leon Brown, the other tight head, is a novice. He'd started the match. He ended up conceding a few too many penalties. He'd been withdrawn not 20 minutes earlier, along with the other prop, Nicky Smith, the loose head. What transpired was that Wales said, hang on, Leon Brown's cramping up and Nicky Smith's not fit. And meanwhile, the minutes tick by, 6, 7, 8 minutes. Can you imagine? Yeah. The crowd is wondering what on earth is going on here. And it turned out in the end that Wales said, we have no specialist tight head, therefore we go to uncontested scrums. Now, what kind of a sport is it that penalizes the attacking team who, because they're so dominant in the scrum, force the opposition to lose their tight head, and then as a consequence, they find themselves not only punished, but neutralized. I mean, the scrum is Georgia's most potent weapon. Many would say it is their only weapon. So all of a sudden, they couldn't use it. So their only option then was to kick for the corner and try and maul their way over. In the meantime, Milton Haig maintained his dignity. He did not flip his lid as Michael Checker did at Twickenham. He simply said, I've asked World Rugby to have a look at this. Now, I'm not apportioning blame, Matt. What I'm saying is that what happened probably brought the game into disrepute, because it's a bit like you going to a West End play and you're getting near the denouement and all of a sudden the actors forget their lines. You know, you sit there and you think, what's going on? Can we have a refund? And I think it does the game irreparable harm. And World Rugby can't say that they hadn't been warned about this. We had a similar schmozzle in Paris at the end of the Six Nations last March.
Can't
when the boot was
forget
on
that one.
Yeah, and the feeling was that France had cheated by bringing on their more powerful tight head prop, claiming that the one he replaced was injured. So World Rugby has to get a grip to this and prevent it happening again, because the vast majority of nearly 60,000 people at the Millennium Stadium last Saturday did not have a clue what was going on.
All right, so I got to ask you a question, and this one we've got to kind of hone it in on a shorter answer, because I'm going to ask you some more questions. Warren Gatland said that Leon Brown had a cramp, which was developed while sitting on the sideline for 25 minutes, recovering after his 57 minutes of playing time. Is Gatland telling the truth?
Well, you have to take these people at face value. If they say that the prop is not fit, then certainly as the referee, you have to accept that, because you can't, as a referee, say, well, I think he is fit and get him on here. And then, some awful accident happens. So nobody wants to see that. There should be a better way of regulating it. When props come off, they're supposed to have somebody, a fourth official, who notes prop so-and-so substituted. Reason for substitution is either tactical or injury. Now, in these two cases, I suspect probably the reason was tactical. So that is not to say that 25 minutes later, Wales turn around and say, well, he's not fit to come back. Now, it's strange, to put it mildly, and it seems to be stretching the imagination a bit, but that is what they said. People took them at face value. And so in the end, Wales won a game, but promptly found themselves having to deny that they had cheated in order to get the result. What I'm saying is not so much, Matt, who was at fault, but World Rugby ought to do something. There ought to be some penal system in operation whereby the crowd is not left in a state of suspense for 6-8 minutes while people are trying to find out what on earth was going on.
Yeah. Okay, so staying on Warren Gatland, my next question. Warren Gatland and what they call Warrenball. Was his extension in 2014 warranted, and should he still be on as coach? Because if you look at his record, it was decent up until 2014, say in the Six Nations, but against the big three from down under, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand, he's 3-32 out of 35 matches, if I have my math correct.
Yeah, the stats don't lie. Look, Gatland took Wales to 2 Grand Slams. The second of those was 6 years ago. They've been to 1 World Cup semi-final. It was the chance of a lifetime. They should have gone on and played in the final. Whether they ever get that close again, I don't know. We were surprised when he was effectively given what amounted to a 6-year contract. As you know, 6 weeks in rugby is a long time, never mind 6 years. Yeah. I thought the Welsh Rugby Union missed a trick last year by allowing him permission to go and coach the Lions. Now, he'd done that in 2013 in Australia, and there was a contractual obligation to release him on that occasion. As far as I understand it, no such obligation existed for the New Zealand tour. And I mean, my view is that Wales had such a massive strategic overhaul to be done of their team to get away from the so-called Warrenball, to play a different game, a more sophisticated game. And I think they wasted a whole season last season while Gatland was on sabbatical preparing to pick the Lions squad. So
good point.
My fear is, I know the World Cup is still a little way away, but my fear is that Wales are behind England, Ireland, and, judging by recent evidence, behind Scotland as well.
All right, well, on that note, we're going to take a quick break and come right back with Mr. Peter Jackson calling in from Cardiff right after this.
All right, everybody, how's it going? We sip, we peel, and we slide. Slide? Nah, like this. We sip, we peel, we win.
I think I'm getting this.
Grab a large or extra large freshly ground, freshly brewed hot coffee for your chance to win great prizes like free coffee for a year. Get your celebration ready. Dunkin' Donuts. This is coffee. This is winning.
If you're in New York City and want to watch some great rugby, have some great food, and some great times, go to the world's best rugby pub, the Pig and Whistle on West 36th Street.
Hey, everybody, Matt McCarthy back at the Fantasy Sports Network, Studio 34. We have Mr. Peter Jackson calling in from Cardiff. Peter, we left you abruptly before that commercial break, but I want to touch upon, we were talking about money, we were talking about Wales, we're talking about Warren Gatland, but now I want to shift gears slightly to the Pro14. Pro14 took in 2 South African teams. They're trying to get money. They're still well behind the Aviva and specifically the top 14 in terms of money. The South African teams have been questionable at best so far. The attendance has been abysmal. What do you think of the prospect of bringing an American team into the Pro 14 as been rumored, as is rumored with like Washington, D.C., for instance?
Well, the Pro 14 under the enterprising guidance of Martin and I have been talking about the possibility of a North American team for some time. My understanding, Matt, and this probably goes back a little while, was that the 2 likely venues were Houston and Toronto. Now, how much it has moved on since then, I don't know. The South African element overtook it in that the admission of the South Africans to the Pro 12, hence 14, brought a fair bit of money to the table. There's a huge gap, as you've alluded to, between the television revenue for Pro 14 and the TV revenue for the Aviva and the top 14 in France. So this was seen as an attempt to get some money in. I think each club got £500,000 as a result of that. But the downside is that the Southern Kings haven't really been as good as abysmal. I mean, they've lost every game. Their crowds are such that you begin to wonder, are they really interested in Port Elizabeth, in what's going on? The Cheetahs have been infinitely more competitive. But again, we wait and see. The problem with the Pro 14 is that it has to compete against the autumn test window. It then has to compete as well during the Six Nations. So for sizable chunks of the season, you get teams like Leinster and Glasgow who provide up to as many as 20 players to their national squads. Now, how on earth do you try to make progress and win a Pro 14 if for 6 or 7 matches you're minus your best 20 players? Huge problem.
True. And, you know, drawing people in South Africa is not going to be enhanced when Scarlets, the Llanelli Scarlets, I don't even, the Llanelli. All right, spelled Llanelli. Scarlets are minus 14 players because of international play, right? So they're going down with 14 stars. That's like the New York Giants or the New England Patriots going down to play a game and they're 14 stars shy because of some United States competition. Sure.
This is the perennial problem that the Pro 14 are struggling manfully to overcome. They wanted the Six Nations to be moved towards the end of our domestic season, April, May, so they could get their entire season played in one fell swoop. But the Six Nations is the most sacred of cows. It generates the cash that keeps the whole European game going here, and without that, just club rugby would implode. So the Six Nations is not going to budge in the foreseeable future. The Pro 14's next TV deal comes up at the end of this season. So it would be imperative, in my view, that they were able to say to a prospective broadcaster, look, not only have we got South Africa, but we're going to have a team, as you mentioned, Matt, Washington. We're going to have another team in Toronto. We're going to make it big time. But at the moment, it's one thing to get an American team in. It's another thing to find the wherewithal to provide a squad that is going to be competitive. Because the last thing the league wants is to have another version of the Southern Kings of Port Elizabeth, because they are anything but competitive.
Well, we could talk to you for days, and I got to get you back on here because we've got a lot more to talk about, but unfortunately we're out of time. I do want you to look up a friend of the show, Blaine Scully, who just re-upped with Cardiff, and get on with him, and I'll put you guys in touch if you're not already. But Mr. Peter Jackson, thank you very much for gracing us with your presence. You are somebody that I'd love to talk to more about rugby with.
You're very kind, Matt. It's all been my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Mr. Peter Jackson calling in from Cardiff. And on behalf of Mr. Jackson, Matt McCarthy, for Rugby Wrap Up here at Studio 34, the Fantasy Sports Network on West 35th Street in Manhattan, signing off.